everyone. Welcome back to Manufacturing Hub. Very happy to have Nick here on this beautiful Wednesday afternoon. Very excited to go ahead and get back into the topic of industrial AI, and we'll invite Nick on in just a moment. But first, if you guys are new here, welcome. If you've been here before, welcome back. If you guys are new here and you're interested in manufacturing, you're interested in automation, you're interested about industrial AI, Manufacturing Hub is the place for you to be. We like to have a fun conversation over the course of the next 60, 65 minutes. We'll get to ask Nick some questions. You guys can ask us some questions. So if you have questions or comments, please feel free to go ahead and throw them in the chat. Our most active chats are on the LinkedIn side, and then beyond that on the YouTube side. So if you're somehow watching somewhere else, those are the best places for you to go ahead and ask questions. We will do our very best to go answer all of those questions as we get through this. We do want to thank MaintainX and Nick for sponsoring this industrial automation theme. So thank you guys so much for that and the continued support of the show. But without further ado, everyone officially welcome to Manufacturing Hub. This is episode 254. My name is Dave. This guy up here is Vlad. We're talking all about industrial AI, and would like to welcome Nick to the show. Nick, thank you so much for being here. Welcome back.
Awesome, Dave, Vlad. It's awesome to be back. It's always a good time chatting with you guys.
No, absolutely. Nick, thank you so much for making the time. Before we dive into the actual AI conversation, for those that may not have seen you or know you, could you give us a reintroduction, please? What it is that you do, how did you get started in the industrial space, and ultimately explain to us a little bit better what you are doing today.
Sure thing, yeah. So I'm one of the co-founders of MaintainX. We launched the business in 2018, so we've been around now little over 8 years. And what we do is we help manage work execution at the front line. So everything from managing maintenance, the reliability side, to standard operating procedures, safety, compliance. We have all of that tied into MaintainX as our platform. We're currently one of the fastest growing companies in the industrial ecosystem, software ecosystem. And we've got, I think we're just about to pass 14,000 customers if we're not there already. And so we've got a really exciting ecosystem worldwide of folks that use us every single day, use our platform, and across industries. From our primary focus in vertical that we have folks is manufacturing, but we have folks across verticals as well, anywhere that physical assets need to be maintained. And so one of the ways we got started was, early in, prior to launching the company, we recognized one thing that was really striking and startling was how much of this world was still manual, pen, paper, spreadsheets. And, AI was still a little bit of a twinkle in everyone's eye, but we were still sort of thinking about it. But the main focus really at that time, even in business case, was that you can't become data-driven if you are doing all of these things in these manual, non-digitized ways. And the primary bottleneck we recognized was that the frontline folks were disengaged from all of these systems that were primarily desktop based. And so our secret sauce out of the gate was really figuring out how to unblock that bottleneck. And where we dropped that pebble was, let's build a mobile experience that was seamless, no training required, something anybody could pick up and start working on, and sort of met people where they were at in their work, in their flow of work, and then gave them benefits from there. And from that's sort of the impetus that allowed us to grow to the stage that we're in today, is by focusing on that end user, which ironically is the person who has typically no decision-making authority, no budget, but is the entire reason that these digital transformation projects are successful or fail. So that's sort of a quick synopsis of how we fast forward here to today.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely awesome, right? I'm excited about this conversation for a number of reasons. But number one, I think that maintenance is almost always to an extent overlooked because it is seen by many companies as a cost center, and they don't see the large opportunities that it can bring. But number two is, I think there's a lot of conversations in the broader, I would say, area of AI happening around how do we generate more code and how do we, create better applications and software. And not a lot of conversations are happening. How do we actually empower people that are doing the physical labor that cannot be, barring maybe humanoids in 10 to 20 years, depending on where you stand, but cannot be automated. So it needs to be augmented more than anything else. But before I ask you, some questions on that side, Nick. I'm really curious because maintenance touches a lot of different industries, right? Not only manufacturing, not only the industrial space, but also, it could be construction, it could be hospitals, right? So how do you maybe balance the maybe what you're building through MaintainX across these, I would say, like different demands in terms of like maintenance? I'm curious, like, how do you think about the different verticals that you're impacting?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's something, frankly, we became more and more aware of the similarities as we continue to develop and build the platform.
Hmm. Okay.
At first glance, you may think, what does a car wash operator have in common with a plant manager, and what is these? And as you go through it, well, uh, they rely on physical assets to be running for them to be able to run their business and their operations. They require their frontline teams to be able to know what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. They all have, everybody has some degree of compliance that they have to adhere to at a base level. In the United States, we have OSHA, and then
Mhm.
beyond that, everyone has their different compliance requirements depending on the industry, and so they've got to make sure that they're staying on top of that. They're not just for the sake of documentation, but for the sake of actually keeping folks safe, keeping your product quality up to date. And so a lot of those workflows really overlapped from a pretty horizontal software, use case of, you've got, we found this way to sort of build this um, around the concept and the object of a work order, and the rest of that sort of flows outward from there. It doesn't mean that every operator from every single industry leverages all of the same features and functionalities to the same degree.
Mhm.
If you're running a franchise restaurant, your root cause analysis, the demands of understanding how to do root cause analysis and really drilling into that is probably less uh, ROI beneficial than it is if you're running a multi-billion dollar manufacturing facility in operation. Um, but it's still, the functionality is there for the folks who do have that reliability, maturity, and interest, and want to kind of grow and build into that. So it's more around, what features and functionality are used by different industries, but
Mhm.
there's enough overlap there to where uh, it kind of helps rise all boats, which I think is one of the benefits, because we don't have to price only to work with food and beverage manufacturers. We don't have to price only
Mhm.
to work for one small niche. We can kind of spread that across ecosystems, which allows us to continue to innovate and deliver a product and experience that uh, gives value to everybody. Yeah.
Interesting. And let me ask you a follow-up question on that front, and I guess to expand on the impact of AI, right? I'm assuming that again, needs are sometimes different, right? And as you've mentioned, people can pick and choose maybe which features they want to focus on. But where do you see the impact of AI sort of like come in? I don't want to say low-hanging fruit, right? But ultimately at maybe these still early stages, right? I would argue there's only been a couple of years that we've made all these LLM advancements. Where do you see AI fitting when it comes to helping these different verticals and work line workers?
Yeah, there's really no shortage of places to look. When you think about opportunities for improvement across the board here, and how much inefficiency and waste there are, there's a lot of low hanging fruit here to start to knock off. And to be very clear, like a strong data foundation is the best place in many cases, the only place to start for a lot of these folks, especially if you want to get into some of the more sophisticated things. But part of where we add value, um, there's a lot of different sort of stepping stones that we can add value right out of the gate. And when you think about a lot of today's AI strategies, they're mostly still designed. It's this classic digital transformation trap from the first go around we did in the early 2000s. They're designed for that desk based worker. They're
Mhm.
built for that white collar worker on the carpeted side of the house, not so
Mhm.
much for the guy working third shift on the concrete side. And so like when I think about ways to make it easier for them, it's how can we surface insights that they need to action on in a seamless way so that they don't have to become software experts. How can we help them get time to value of, hey, you go from a cold start of, we don't have any foundation, we're not doing anything digitally, to give them that digital foundation where they're getting value as quickly and effectively as possible, and be able to help them accelerate and grow at the rate that they're able to do that. meaning that they're not constrained by internal resources to establish and set up a CMMS, or internal resources to build out and map tags across from their OT network into these systems. What are some of the ways that we can kind of help deploy value very quickly, and then give them the context and information that they need, so that they immediately get, you have to get value out of it right away. This can't be something that you've got to, hey, trust us, use this thing for 6 months, and then you're going to wake up one day and it's going to make your life better. Forget it. It's just extra work. It's got to make their life better almost right out of the gate. And so there's a lot of ways that we can leverage AI to do that I think are that we're starting to see a lot of really exciting results and real customer value and satisfaction from.
Let me ask you one follow-up before I pass it over to Dave, right? So you've mentioned data needs to be, to an extent, available, right? So I'm curious, maybe like what kind of areas are you guys seeing to be like most valuable, right? Is it documentation? Is it a full like work order system? Is it an existing like ERP? Is it all of the above, right? Like, could you maybe paint a better picture? Because I have had conversations with, plants that have pretty much nothing automated to everything automated, right? And everything in between. So I'm curious, which areas of data do you normally or typically ingest?
Yeah, it's a good question. So there's a lot of, like, when you think of what the low hanging fruit is, it's your current documentation, it's OEM manuals, it's things that any SOPs and things that have already been generated and built out. Those are obvious places of, sources of truth, compliance, documentation, things of that nature, where it's standardized, it's easy to easy to ingest and pull through. And then when you look at like the state of standardized, the data foundations across the ecosystem, even, I can't tell you how many, I'm sure you all have met similar, where they've got historians on a PLC that's never connected to anything. They're like, yeah, we got like 8 years of data on this. Oh, great. What have you done with it? Well, it's just there if we ever figure out what to do with it. Right. And you can go around to the most sophisticated Fortune 10, all the way down to the mom and pop that have gone to some degree of this journey. And you'll find that none of these systems are connected. They're all siloed. They don't necessarily have a comprehensive strategy around how to bring all of that together. And so our goal is to sort of see, like, what can we do to start adding value cross-functionally by giving information to the front line that they need, and then conversely sharing information from the front lines back to those other teams that need it. Easy example is, most ERPs have parts information, they have some cost information, but they don't know, almost no ERP is currently tracking which parts are spent against which asset and when are they being consumed, and how is that, and so how that creates and it's not a function of like the ERP doesn't track that. It's just a function of the frontline team isn't usually operating inside of an ERP. And so how do we help, eliminate some of those friction points, which then allow things from what's the AI thing? Well, now we can start to do fun things like parts forecasting. We can start doing things around asset health and predictability to help you understand when should these assets be replaced versus when they shouldn't. Information that if you had that, you were able to connect those dots, you might be able to kind of do something a little more interesting there, because you do have some data history. But when this data is siloed, you're not able to kind of move things along in the direction that maybe, you'd hope you could.
Mm-hmm. Dave, what are your thoughts?
I think it's very interesting, Nick. I especially like it, and I kind of wrote down over here, you talking about at the beginning of MaintainX and the kind of direction of the building of the software. I kind of wrote down like operator or user obsession, right? Yeah. You said something that was both very telling and something that I'm not sure I've ever heard a software group talk about of, hey, we built and designed this for the people who are going to be using it, knowing full well that the people who are going to be using it almost have no way of paying for it, right? We have to go build this for a group and go convince another group that it is as valuable as we think it is. Yeah. And then they are the ones that are going to go sign the contract and go send the check. Can you talk about that a little bit more? And then I want to go talk about how you're using that and leveraging some more of these AI tools from that focus, please.
Yeah, 100%. So if everything, it can be tempting to say, as you kind of grow the organization, as you start to get opportunities to talk to executives of these bigger companies. They come to you and they want to say, what's the razzle dazzle? Help me understand where this displaces our legacy systems or other things. What are the big advantages? And there's almost this expectation that you're gonna show them some magical experience for them.
Mm-hmm.
And so there becomes this pull where they're going to say, build these magical features that we need. And it's not to minimize their value, the functionality that they need, but as much as it is to say that the secret sauce to what makes MaintainX, and they want to know, why is MaintainX going to be different than the last thing we, like getting a voluntary root canal to switch our last system out, right? Why would we do that? And the crux of it is that if your frontline team isn't using your system you have today, there's sort of like a lot of these executives are so disconnected from that frontline experience. They may have started there 20 years ago, and they're like, well, I had to walk uphill in the snow, broken glass, barefoot to school every day. Why, these youngins should have to do it too, kind of mindset. And they think they're a couple pencil whippings away from adoption. Maybe we'll have everybody sit down, we'll do a retraining. And if you've got to, browbeat your team into using a tool and continuously educate them on how to do it, there's low likelihood of that being successful. And that doesn't even take into consideration like the amount of turnover that some of these industries are facing, where you'd have to be constantly training to, somebody who by the time they learn it, they're statistically out the door. And so you need something they can pick up and use and get value from right away. And it needs to add value to their day-to-day life. And if it doesn't, and if we lose that plot, then nothing else we build upstream matters. None of the AI functionality, the agentic, workflows that we want to be able to capitalize on some of these data foundations are going to work. None of the interoperability will matter if the frontline folks suddenly need a 300-page manual to use MaintainX. So that's sort of where, if you lose focus on why these other systems have sort of stalled or under-delivered, the answer always falls there. And so we have to make sure that we have hyper clarity around understanding, who our customer is, but more importantly, who our user is, and making sure that we don't conflate the value of building for the folks that make these successful.
Interesting. Okay. I appreciate that. Yeah. So taking that lens and that perspective, when you're talking about some of these AI tools, right? So you had talked about forecasting on the part side, which is, I don't know, some people do it well, most people do it very poorly. You talked about going into the ERP levels. Is this, you've created the ease of access, and so now people are using the system, and now we're inputting the data, and there's are there chatbots in there so that like frontline workers can go ask this? Are there, hey, we now have this amount of data, we may want to go talk about frontline, or we may want to go talk about parts forecasting, or we may want to go do these other things? What does that process look like? How are you using these AI tools to enable those frontline workers?
Sure. So I touched on, like, there's this labor shortage, right? And we've got skilled labor shortage. It's a crisis. It's happening. We're gonna have 3+ million jobs unfilled by 2030. Most of it's due to retirement and just lack of inbound, right? So when we think about what's some of the most valuable data that can be captured today that may need to be resurfaced is often data that's not documented anywhere. It's stuff that belongs in that 30-year veteran technician's head. The guy who can walk through and just hear an issue from 100 yards away and know, oh, this is going to be one of those days. I got to go, immediately knows how to jump into action. And then you put that next to the 20-something-year-old who's fresh into the facility, and that sound won't even trigger a response, right? It's not even an annoying sound. It's just a subtle thing. And then not to mention the know-how of, like, when those things do happen, how do I fix it? Making it really easy to capture what are we observing for? What do these inspection processes look like? Then how do we then go through that inspection? How do I know what to fix? And then how do I fix it? Are really important steps that aren't frequently available in a manual either, right? We manuals cover a certain segment of trying to say this the right way. They cover a certain number of use cases and issues that can come up, but when you use that equipment in a way that wasn't maybe with the environment and the materials that you're pushing through it and the runtime that you're running it or lack thereof, some of those recommendations are not always as useful as the guy who's been working with that machine for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do we bring in that, when we're talking about shortening that learning curve, we want to bring in the skilled labor knowledge of the folks who are kind of moving towards retirement and make it so that we're capturing it and then making it easy to resurface for that next generation. And so as we think about like, what are some of the ways that AI is doing that today is we're leveraged. We got the ability when you close out a work order, we ask the technicians to leave a voice note on what they did to fix it. And it understands every accent from deep Cajun to, hillbilly, redneck, whatever, New Yorker, Scottish, Irish, everything, and multi-language, by the way. So if they're speaking Spanish, Vietnamese, anything else, we can translate that in. And then it starts to standardize and bring in contextual knowledge around what happened when those assets were repaired or inspected, and then builds that knowledge base in-house. And so that's one of those critical components of your knowledge library and knowledge base that most companies today are not storing at all. Maybe they've got a great setup with their PLCs networked and they've got ignition firing, but they don't have what does Joe do when this equipment fails, and how do we make sure that we keep Joe's knowledge in-house when he earns his retirement in 2 years or a year from now, and how do we make sure that we've captured that and documented it so that the next guy coming in, next man up, is not going to have to relearn those issues and can just go straight to the fix and understand what was been solved. And not only for that one single location scenario, but imagine you've got a facility, you've got an organization that's got 100 locations, globally, and similar footprint of equipment, maybe not perfect overlap, but there's a lot of overlap in equipment. And you've got these types of issues that happen once every 5 to 10 years. They're just those anomalies. When you've got 100 sites running at full capacity every day, those 5-year incidents are probably happening every couple of months at the minimum, right? And just not in the same place. And so being able to surface and save and document that knowledge from one site, it could be happening in Nice, France, and then we're able to share that wisdom and that insight with somebody in Omaha in that same company on the same asset 2 years later when that happens. Those are some of the things that I think are really, really exciting about being able to leverage, knowledge-based AI across organizations at scale.
That's super interesting, right? Like the one thing, well, I would say I picked up on a couple of things, but a big challenge, at least for me, when I was managing a lot of technicians, was always to get them to document, the issues that they fixed. Because as you know, a lot of these systems are going to be obviously computerized, but you still have to spend that time, type it all in. And so the fact that you have just that one change, which is voice translation, that can, like transcribe the entire event while they're going somewhere else or maybe doing something, some other task, is very interesting. I had not known about this feature, but at the same time, I also wanted to ask you as a follow-up, Nick, I think there's an interesting opportunity for gamification, so to speak, like through AI, right? Like if you haven't sent this note in, there may be some kind of a reward system, but also, interesting like small incentives to document. I'm assuming the system under the hood can also check what has been reported for that specific of equipment, right? And double check the transcription as well for accuracy. So I'm curious, maybe also, how do you make that learning curve a little bit easier for the techs and the maintenance personnel?
For sure. Yeah. There's a few ways we're doing it. Like I literally just got off a call with a customer and operator who's, they have got a fair amount of turnover in their business. And, he was constantly taking calls from as I'm sure you used to, Vlad, when you manage that large group of things, constantly taking calls. How do I do this? How do I do that? 2 a.m. calls, nonstop. He says they've all changed their first pass to going into the Copilot, into our AI tool, and asking. And he said it's reduced his call volume by like 98%, and not for bad reasons, for the reasons that they're actually getting the answer they need when they solve it. And so from a learning curve perspective, these are folks that are far more effective and productive in their early ramp period than they would have before. He's less, and frankly, he started to get a lot of, psychologically, it was wearing on him to constantly have to keep training new people because it was just, this revolving door of folks. And so he didn't want to invest, it started to feel like a burden to invest his time and energy into training someone who may not be here the next day. And so it's kind of gotten him a lot more, it's sort of taken that burnout away from him as a leader. It's enabled and unlocked the ability for their team to go in and get be valuable and useful in those earlier days of their start of their work than they used to be. And then from like a learning curve perspective, we're meeting, especially this younger generation. This is the mobile first, Gen Z. These are mobile first folks. They're, most Gen Z and younger folks, the idea of picking up the phone and making a phone call is like torture, right? If they can figure out how to solve it over their phone before, with a text message or a tool or an app, they will do that 10 out of 10 times before they pick up the phone and call somebody. So this is natively right in the workflow of the culture of this next generation of workers as well. So their natural inclination is to say, hey, let me go see if let me see if this app thing works that they've given us. And when it does, it just sort of builds this reinforcement loop that, I can get the information I need from right here in the tool we're using. And so that's part of that gamification is simply just helping them do their jobs, not requiring them to have unnecessary interactions if they don't want to. And most engineers you're a little more introverted anyway, so that just adds to the complication of wanting to call someone, right? So some of those elements I think are really helpful, and then there's more for us to do, that more to come on kind of fun ways we're going to continue to develop the gamification from a product perspective as well. We don't need it to feel like it's Candy Crush, but we do want to kind of help you feel like, give you some direction on whether it's recognition that you should add some more context to something, or maybe give you some rewards for doing things the right way.
Yeah, I mean, some of us look at those maintenance roles and wish it was more like Candy Crush, but that's not the that's not the reality of most facilities, at least not in the current state, right? And you've mentioned this a little bit, but even I've gotten comments from maintenance managers in some of these facilities where they're to the point where they're trying to train, and this is a real comment that I've gotten. We're looking to get subway workers to be our maintenance personnel because that is how hard it is to find people in that specific area, right? That's simply the reality. And as you mentioned, it is usually a difficult transition on both sides.
Yeah.
But does require some coaching, some like training on the tool side, but also on what needs to be done on the work orders, and on the more you can reduce the learning curve on the software and sort of like mobile first type of an application, I think the easier it is to make such a big transition, at least in my mind, right? Let me ask you a more difficult follow-up and question, right? When it comes to maybe skepticism or pushback, what kind of maybe comments are you getting? And I want to split that in maybe like two parts, right? On the general CMMS side, right? Like we're happy with the pen and paper and the pagers that we've been using for the last couple of decades, and it simply has worked for us. But also on the AI side, right? I think there's a generally understood premise that there is some level of hallucination. So the moment you bring up AI, even if you haven't explained the guardrails, there's maybe an inherent kind of like hesitation immediately. So I'm curious what those comments have been for you and how those conversations evolved.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a couple of factors to it. Like one is there's a classic change management challenge of, I don't want to move my cheese, right? don't I don't like change. I've been doing this job a certain way for X number of years, and why do I need to try something different? And so the framing is, and this is something I talk to a lot of like executives at companies as well, and engineering leaders, and helping remind them. I'm like, I do this classic trope of like, how many of you think of yourselves as a salesperson, right? And none of them do. And I'm like, the reason your projects are, the entire reason your projects succeed or fail is because is due to how effective you are at selling it. And the sales pitch you're going to give to senior leadership to get the sign off is not the same sales pitch you got to give to the front line. And I think that's a really important framing to help folks that are watching this understand is that, yeah, leadership's going to want to understand what's the ROI, what's the impact on our efficiency and our throughput and et cetera, right? But the front line wants to know, what's this going to do for me? And I've been doing this. Am I going to have less work? No, maybe not. I don't know, right? They don't believe you if you tell them. So am I going to get paid more? Am I going to pay the same? Like, if we get a higher ROI, does this mean I get a bonus? They ask pretty pointy questions. And there's a couple of things to it, right? One is, you think about how many times a day they're being nagged to do something, or how many radio calls, all this stuff that just sort of flows throughout the day in this non-permanent state of information that they have to kind of constantly keep in RAM, keep in their memory. Is that something that gives them joy? Is that what got them excited about going and working in that industry? 99 out of 100 times, sorry, that's a hard no. And then I find a sassy, guys, a little bit of smart ass. Like, yeah, I love it. No, but the reality is that's not what brings them joy. And so helping eliminate that noise adds value to their day right away. Helping them be able to now, and then you'll run into these same classic characters, especially the veterans that have said, I've been saying we need to replace this or change this for years, and they never listen to me, blah, blah, blah. Well, a lot of that is because many of these organizations in this pre-data foundational stage are run very politically. It's the squeakiest wheel or the most convincing guy gets what he needs. Does it make sense from a data-driven perspective? Nobody knows. They don't have data. So he's convincing. Let's get it. This allows them to go to bat for their ideas, whether it's, hey, we got to replace this, this conveyor belt system, or that we've got to replace this. We've got to stock more motors in the parts shelf, whatever it is. I now have a data-driven case to make with leadership, and whether or not they want to, obviously, but now it's no longer just a, he said, she said, this is what I think. It's now, here's what I have the data to prove. So a lot of them get tickled by that component. And then there's also this other element where they're not, these veterans are not blind to the realities of the culture of this next generation. They realize that they get a little bit, unsettled when they think about what happens when they leave. They all feel important, and frankly, most of them, the vast majority of them, are very important to the operation day to day. But what's the legacy they're going to leave behind? What do they want the place they've spent all these years putting their blood, sweat, and tears into to fall apart the minute they leave? What does that mean for the future for their kids and their grandkids? And what does that say about the legacy of their life's work? This is an opportunity for them to memorialize it and preserve what they know and document it so that next generation doesn't have to, the next generation can continue to sustain and build on what they've done and build on the shoulders of these giants, rather than, have to try to relearn those mistakes and hope that there's enough runway in the business to go through that pain. And between those three arguments, I get through the resistance one way or the other, and you kind of feel out what personality type is going to click with which one of those. And then when it comes to AI, right? The resistance there is a lot of it's just lack of awareness and familiarity. I mean, if you look at the chat, it feels like ChatGPT's everywhere, Anthropic Claude's everywhere. It's all the talk online. But then you realize how many people who work in this industry are online the same way we are, in the same way probably a lot of your listeners. The metrics of people who haven't even heard of ChatGPT so far or even used it are crazy. It feels like everyone's using it, but there's still a huge adoption gap just of basic awareness. And it's not just our industry ecosystem. It's just everyday normal people. They're not, it's not to discredit how powerful this moment is, but we're part of this culture of folks who get really excited about the emerging technology. And then there's people who just have a job and kids to pick up at soccer practice and bills to pay. And then they just want a beer to close to relax before they go to bed. And they want to watch, baseball or basketball for an hour and then just do it all over again. And they're not going online and trying to figure out what's the latest and greatest and coming out of Silicon Valley. So there's so many, so the lack of awareness there is still like a really exciting opportunity because we get to be the first impression for a lot of folks when it comes to AI. A lot of our customers and our users, MaintainX's AI tool is the first time they've ever used AI. They hadn't even used ChatGPT or anything else, knowingly at least. Have they been part of like a Facebook algorithm, machine learning things? Yep. But as far as like using a generative AI tool, they prompt, we're often their first experience. So for the young guys, it's very easy to explain the value, right? This is going to help you get access to information you need and the know-how and shorten that and compress that time. But then you talk to these 30-year veterans, like, I know the manual inside and out. I'm like, great. Can you recite all 20,000 SKUs for the part numbers? You can start alphabetically, however you'd like. I'm ready, right? And nobody, like, they know everything, but they don't know the part number SKUs. They don't know the things that they know where to go find it. They know how to pull that up. Like, but even that whole workflow of getting the manual out, digitally or otherwise, then digging through, finding it, and they can just ask Copilot, what's this part number SKU? Or what's this? And instantly get that information. That's usually a mind-blown moment for them. They're like, I spend 15 minutes on that a couple times a day, multiple times a week. If I can get it in seconds or, now that kind of is their aha moment for a vast majority of them that truly do know the manual inside and out. There's a lot of other sort of similar examples, but it's kind of giving them a different sales pitch, a different perspective on where does AI add value to your life. And even if you do know this, you want to quickly just validate that this is the right approach to it. If that process is only a few moments long and it's not some like 20-minute expedition, would that give you a little more peace of mind before you go jump into something you haven't done in 18 months? 100%, right? And so those are some of the ways that we're breaking through those barriers and boundaries. But all that to say, we have some customers who corporate policy is no AI. We built a kill switch to no AI tools on in their product. They'll come around, they'll change. I have no doubt, but we're happy to meet people where they are.
Absolutely. I think it's an interesting comment that you brought up, Nick, and I think it's very true, right? The vast majority of people have not intentionally gone out to ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini and gone to just go test them out, to go through the process of testing them out. I think a lot of people, I reference to, especially when I talk to clients about AI, like my mom, I feel like my mom sees AI from the news. And so they're getting a very filtered version of what AI can and cannot be. And so I think it is interesting. I'm never going to convince my mom to intentionally adopt AI. Having said that, I think you also bring up a good point. Right. So I feel like the majority of the conversations we have on industrial AI is, hey, we want more access. We want more control. I want an MCP server so that I can write directly to my SQL database, or I can write to any of my databases or into my ERP or any of these things. Right. I want unlimited access, and I want to be able to prompt from my terminal for unlimited access. Hopefully we've backed this up. We probably haven't backed it up. Someone is going to completely take out one of these systems accidentally. Having said that, like, what are there guardrails when MaintainX is implementing some of these solutions of read only, of not everyone gets write access, of we're only going to go start in this? How does that rollout look like for people that have not used AI before?
Yeah, absolutely. So to be very clear, there are guardrails that we have in place in a number of ways. We build our own in-house models. It doesn't go out to the internet. So we train these to explicitly say it doesn't know, or ask your manager if it doesn't know. It won't hallucinate an answer. It won't say rip all the cables out, hold up a lighter, see what happens, drop in some kerosene. It's very much safety first, oriented around knowledge that's verifiable and can be backed up with a source. But when you think about guardrails as well, like, what are the guardrails for a new technician that goes out and is asked to fix something that he may have misrepresented his skill set on the interview on, and he goes out there and he doesn't want to scare anyone into thinking he doesn't know how to do it or get in trouble. So he just goes out and tries to do it, right? There's a future state right now where like AI agents are going to recognize that this is a new tech. and it's going to proactively surface all of the most relevant questions that relevant safety protocols, common failure modes, tips from previous work orders before they even ask. That way, they don't even have to have the hubris or ego to know that or even the know-how, like, what should I ask? We'll be able to surface knowing that this is the first time this technician has worked on this type of equipment before, done this type of procedure. And so when you think about what are the guardrails today without AI, there's a lot of trust, a lot of scary things. And then you'd argue that some places there aren't guardrails that maybe should be, but that's just life. Like, how do we deal with it? And it's not to minimize the value, like the importance of having governance in our tooling sets. It's not to minimize the fact that everything we have in our system today is, we've got permission-based access layers, so that if you can't access it in another system, you're not gonna be able to access it in MaintainX. And so making sure that we can kind of bring those I think common sense guardrails into, for technology, from a technology perspective, into our product. That's going to be kind of a core that's a core building block of everything we're doing.
Yeah, I think it's a very philosophical question to an extent as well, right? Because we always tend to think of what's coming next, but if you look in retrospect, right, it's almost a rite of passage for a control systems engineer to have overwritten the code of the entire production line, and
Yeah.
here we are incurring hours of downtime as a result of that, right? But we never necessarily capture that as that was his fault, that could have been improved with the more modern tools. And the same analogy could be made with autonomous vehicles, right? We always think about, well, what's the rate of failure on their side versus how many accidents are we getting with the current operation. So it's an interesting conversation. I'm not sure that there will be a consensus, or maybe there will be some kind of a party that documents and figures out a baseline, but it would be very interesting to see that data, right? Like, what was the standard or limit of acceptance in the past versus what are we now getting to an extent using AI. But I'm assuming some entity will at some point run studies and figure that out.
Yeah, you've got some hard data around like safety metrics that you can start to track, and that's the only one that a company is really honest with themselves about, only because they have public records of it. But when you look at their the way they represent downtime and some of these other things today, it's all manual, it's all honor code, and it's all inaccurate. And so when you try to figure out what are those, if you think about what does the executive team think their tolerance is versus what their actual floor level reality is, they're often in two completely different universes. And it's just a function of the processes and systems that are in place today that don't allow folks to track it.
Yeah, exactly. And again, like I will restate the same comment, right? I think it's in the past you couldn't track it, right? Because if a person makes the mistake, they obviously can revert back to the previous state. But with AI, you get a log of everything that has been done. So it's very easy to point the finger and say, like, well, this is what AI did, and that's why we got this specific error. But on the personal level, again, like going back to maintenance, you could have used the wrong part, you could have used the wrong, like belt, sprocket, pulley, the wrong grease. Well, they're just going to, obviously they're going to fix it, right? But they're never going to say, well, as a result of that downtime, because the person made the mistake, right? So it's going to be very difficult, I think, to figure that out. And I'm personally am very curious again on some tangible data as we continue to move forward.
Yeah.
Let me, Nick, maybe ask you a follow-up question on that side, right? So the big conversations, at least on my side, have also been around the on-prem deployments versus, like cloud. And of course, you can do different things depending on where the servers are located or how they're maybe like isolated. What are your thoughts on maybe, safeguarding some of that information and, like AI applications on prem, as opposed to funneling that into what I would call more powerful and more capable LLM models in the cloud? Like, how do you maybe answer some of those questions and potential like pushbacks, or I guess like buy-ins?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is like we made the transition to cloud like a decade plus ago. We've and there's and for all the on-prem folks that are still sort of hanging on to the edge there, particularly with like systems data, like the level of cybersecurity available today, when you pay for it at certain levels is just as strong and effective as is on-prem. And you could make a lot of cases for challenges that exist with on-prem. But that said, data collection is often local or edge-based, right? Whether it's sensor data, PLC data, IoT devices, things like that. And there's there are strong, like well battle tested protocols now that help manage everything from read-write access to those protocols. Like with MaintainX, we don't need to write access to your sensors. We don't need write access to your PLCs. We don't want to write anything back to them. We want to just read, ingest, and make sure the technicians and the frontline folks have the information that they need to do their job efficiently. And so from a Guardrails perspective, we're able to, manage. I think cloud data is with an understanding how your pipeline for your data works in an organization is really important, and you've got to have somebody who can kind of cleanly map that out. In a very like non-technical way to say, here's the things that can be written to, and here's what can't be written to. Here's what runs locally. Here's where it does exit to the cloud. These are solved problems. These are solved challenges. And the reality is, like, if you want to be able to take advantage of this AI revolution that's happening, the compute that you can do locally versus in the cloud are day and night difference. And so the reality is, if you want to be able to be at that at the level, if you want that competitive edge, you're going to need to be able to take advantage of some of this cloud technology to kind of go to that next level. Not to mention, like, the pre-AI, even something that mattered pre-AI, was being able to have, real-time, high-quality customer support and customer success. That when you're on-prem, customer support is a lot harder. Being able to do real-time troubleshooting of things can be a lot trickier than if you've got the ability to have, virtually provide access temporarily to your system and have access for somebody to walk you through some of the challenges you're going through, and understanding, like, working with vendors that respect your IP and understand how to safeguard it and firewall it from everyone else is, again, solves problems that are important, that do need to be taken seriously, but respectable vendors are going to give you all the confidence in the world that they're doing it the right way.
Absolutely. I think fantastic points. Nick, we do have some people to thank before we continue on with some questions and some comments with the chat.
Yeah.
Here's the painful truth. Your technicians are spending 40% of their time looking for answers, answering radio calls, and not focusing on what really matters, fixing assets. That's why we built MaintainX. Now your technicians can leverage AI to get the answers that they need instantly, focusing on what really matters, getting the asset back online. Check out MaintainX.
Thank you to MaintainX for sponsoring this theme, this episode, and the continued support of the show. Talking about AI, we've got a handful of really good comments that I want to go and pull in, if I can go find my bar here. So Jory in the comments is saying that he's been in maintenance for 15 years and doesn't feel that the guys coming in care about the job after they leave. Seems like people view it as a job and not a career. So having a system like MaintainX and being able to have the info in there is highly beneficial with the people who are in the process of job hopping. And I think that is absolutely fantastic. I would agree with Jory. Not many people are having their beer and trying to go hack clogged code. Most of the rational human beings are probably going and watching preseason spring training, baseball or the NBA or one of those other normal television shows. And then we've got Hank in the comments talking about how he used AI this week to create some cause and effects charts and some operation manuals with Copilot directly from his PLC program, and it blew his mind. As I told him in the chat, and as I've said several times, am extremely impressed with what we're able to pull out with solutions like this. And I'm very interested to see the direction that we go and I guess how good these programs, be it Copilot or anything else, is able to grow and the insights they're able to go ahead and pull in. Nick, I want to ask you a completely different question.
Sure.
Tell us about the Wrench Factor.
Wrench Factor is a podcast that I host on LinkedIn and YouTube. It's similar to y'all. in that regard. And it's just it's not a infomercial or an ad. And if it ever feels that way, we're doing something wrong, and let us know. But it's thought leadership, trying to bring in different points of view and perspectives from folks across industry, whether they're folks that have a lot of experience with IoT sensors, or whether they're folks that have different points of view. And so we try to create these 20-minute sort of quick hits that you can do on your drive to work, and learn a little something, and then get back to the tunes or whatever you want to do. So yeah, they're fun.
Nice.
I have I guess a question related to one of the previous comments. I think Hank mentioned something very interesting, Nick, which is that he used AI for a very specific application to pull out and obviously transform his PLC code, right? But going back to the comments that at least in my opinion, you need to start with something a little bit smaller, right? And the three of us are probably, I would call, power users of AI, but that's not necessarily the case for everyone. So maybe how do you get started with some of the smaller applications of AI? How do you maybe educate frontline workers when it comes to using AI to solve some of their challenges?
Yeah, well, for the most part, like the reality is you put it in their flow of work, and you surface information to them in ways that don't require them to solicit it in a fancy way. They shouldn't have to go through and know what that they're using an AI LLM that's going to generate something like the less acronyms, the better. The more just, I want this done, or I need to know what to do. And the more we can kind of understand where in their flow they'll be thinking those questions or asking those questions, and help proactively surface it to them. It doesn't matter. We've got folks that have just thought it was magic. There's a little genie in their phone. That's fine. If that's how they want to understand it, that's totally fine. They're way smarter than me at literally everything else. I don't need them to use the right acronyms and terminology for how this works. And so the way that we want them to, the way we need to surface, AI, whether it's generative or agentic workflows, is something that just shows up where they would expect to see something, or be where we can expect that they'll be asking this type of question, and then proactively surface that potential solution. And that's sort of where we view it right now.
Do you, I guess, and I'm curious, obviously I'm assuming that you collect some data and understand how they're using the application. Do you often have to help them along the way? Because again, when I was using ChatGPT for the first time, you kind of expect, well, here's my prompt, and you expect it to handle everything. But the reality is, you need to also understand like what works best in this industrial era. I think there's also different like nuances. Like, do you have to explain to them what is the fullest potential, of course, and how to best get the answer that they're looking for?
Yeah, and that's part of like the fun product challenge is like, I'm trying to remember which if it was like several of the LLMs like ChatGPTs have done this, where they have these like suggested prompts. You click this to start you off. We're able to do that with whether it's like our Copilot report builder. We don't say you can build whatever report you want with AI and fancy LLMs. Like we use example questions of real world things that they ask us in our conversations with them. Help me build a root cause analysis for this. Help me identify the parts usage on these assets over. We prompt them with the types of questions that, and then encourage them to ask whatever question they have, that so they don't feel like they have to ask the smart technically correct question. They can put typos in there. They can ask it how do we track how many thingamabobs we're using on this types of on these doohickeys. Like they can say how they can learn, they can speak however they might want to speak it. And if we've done our job right, then the product will surface those answers, or at least steer them in that direction close enough to where they can tweak a dial or two with some other very simple prompting. And so that's sort of like how we think about it from a product perspective. And same thing as we start to think about agents and workflows. Like if we put in an AI agent that helps with, pre-populating purchase orders and PO requisitions off of parts forecasted usage. Like I don't need to call, like we don't need to call that your like parts AI agent super pro max. Like we can call it this is your parts assistant or the night shift. You can have them think of it as another worker and label it as the workers that they're sort of replicating or mimicking workflows from. And that way you don't have to change their world and shake it up too much. You don't want to shake the snow globe to the point where they're just dizzy with stars going all over the place. You want them to use the language and the word verbiage that they're used to seeing. And that's what helps it be successful. That's what helps it get, through that adoption curve, right? The last thing we're failing to connect those dots if folks aren't even clicking out of curiosity because they're so confused about what the hell that thing does.
It's super interesting, right? And I'm nodding my head because I'm also in part reflecting from my experience and kind of thinking of different ideas and features that could be implemented and made easier, right? Obviously the tools can now learn also from the person, adapt to that experience. You were mentioning that maybe one person queries it a little bit different than somebody else at a specific site. They have some differences than at another site there, and a lot of it is also self-iterative to an extent, right? It's going to build on it. But yes, I'm super excited to see what's to come. We talked a little bit off screen about what is the potential, what is the future. I think that maintenance is going to continue to be very manual when it comes to doing the actual work. But I think that AI can certainly augment a lot of the auxiliary type of tasks for the frontline workers. But yeah, definitely appreciate it. Dave, what are your thoughts on that front?
I agree. I think I really liked your point, Nick, in which you were saying the best use cases are ones in which people don't know that they are using AI, right? Like they just considered another worker, and this worker or the night shift is working on these particular solutions. And I 100% agree. When we look at AI solutions on our side, we are looking at like what are our top 6 prompts, or like you get to this point, go click one of these prompts, it'll go give you some of this information, and then if you want to get deeper, you can re-click it, go rephrase that, and then go ahead and dig even deeper and more specifically. And that is where I am seeing having those set canned prompts is extremely valuable. It's much more approachable than go ask this system anything, right? Like some people, the technologists very much like the go ask this system anything. The rest of humanity is probably a little bit overwhelmed with, this is the first time I'm asking it, what should I ask it? Speaking of, what are you doing on your AI side currently? Are you tinkering? What are you tinkering with? What are you looking at? Do you have any fun side projects worth mentioning?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's like drinking from a fire hose, trying to keep up to date with everything that's being shipped in the space. But there's the short answer is playing with agents, agentic workflows, trying to figure out how this is actually my Claude co-pilot or co-work, that's you're talking to right now. It's my avatar. I'm off at the beach. It's trying to figure out how can I continue to, not only learn for my own exciting purposes. My fun side project is trying to figure out how I can bring some of these ideas or innovations or workflows or possibilities to my team. And then how could we use those and analogize those to forward our customers? I think it's difficult for us to say we can help build agentic AI workflows and things like that for our customers if we aren't doing them ourselves, right? And so making sure that everything we can have a deep fundamental understanding, not just within our engineering team, but across our entire organization, to understand how do we make sure that everything we do is efficient. There's where we're not doing repetitive, busy work, things that can be that we can put process behind. So those are the fun like puzzles that geek me out and get me excited. And then on the side, I do have like a whole portfolio of like meme videos that I just haven't figured out where to release them, but I have fun making them. And just getting to like see what's happening on that creative edge of generative video is partially just to make sure that I can at least know how good it's getting, so that I won't be fooled when when there's some crazy press release announcement from a world leader that isn't real. And I'm like,
What are you using on the video side? I know that they pulled the plug on Sora recently, right?
yeah, but
What's
Sora
what do you think?
was like
Yesterday.
Yeah, they had the best for a hot moment in time, but like with Z Dance and Kling AI, and they've done some pretty impressive things. X with Grok has got some interesting image or video generation that work that they're still drilling down. Even Gemini's pretty cool, and so just trying to figure out like Gemini won't put my face in a video. It just thinks it doesn't care if it's my face. It doesn't like that could be anyone's face that doesn't give you permission, so they won't do it. But like XAI they go overboard and they'll put my face anywhere almost, it seems. But that can make the fun meme video. So trying to figure that out is always just fun to play with. And so I've got a fun April Fool's video that I'm cooking up on my side. That's my
Interesting. I'll have to play around with that a little bit more. I haven't done much video on the AI front.
I like it. I'm excited to watch the Wrench Factor After Dark, the new YouTube channel that was announced right here by Nick, co-founder MaintainX. All the meme videos. It's interesting.
It would be weird, like your goofy sci-fi weird nerd type of thing, more than it would be like anything that they're like, I should call the police.
Good.
I would hope so. I would hope so. On the photo side, I was playing around with Nano Banana maybe over the weekend. I'm very impressed with what it can do on the photo side, and like going and uploading your face and like a viral picture, and how easily it can go transpose your face into said viral picture. We are certainly blurring the lines between reality and fiction. And honestly, sometimes the fiction, the AI generated images are in fact maybe too good. They are so good, you're like, this cannot possibly be the
something that has nothing to do with this really, but sort of is a fun trick if you got any weddings coming up. Is you take a picture of the bride and groom up with the the officiant, and then just swap out the officiant for like Trump, and then send it to the old people that aren't there, that couldn't make it, and they are pretty convinced Trump is doing it, and they don't know how it happened. And
perfect. So Nick here helping you rage bait people who don't understand what AI is. Honestly, that's where one of these conversations had to get on Manufacturing Hub, and so I'm glad that we've went there. Thank you so much for that, Nick. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us. If you have thoughts or questions, please feel free to continue to go ahead and dump them in the chat. We will get to it after the show is over. Nick, we do want to ask you all of the same questions we get to ask our guests at the back end of the show. My first one, as Vlad knows, is one of my favorite. It is predict the future. So on your side, what do you think AI or industrial AI is going to look like in the next 2 to 3 years?
Yeah, I think it's like obviously a little bit of a biased worldview, but I think it has the potential to take maintenance from this view of being a cost center to a full-blown growth center and growth opportunity. When folks when these companies recognize how much is being wasted and how much inefficiency and waste is happening there, and realize that this is a data-rich environment that has all the potential in the world to not only capitalize on the power of becoming more data driven, but can then almost accelerate through this AI future and promise. I think we're going to see a complete pivot in the way that that side of the house has been driven, and there's going to be a lot of cool technology that sort of helps accelerate that and amplifies it. But I think the core, if I put money down on where we are in 2 to 3 years, I've got good odds there.
Oh, I like that. I'm not sure anyone has ever played off of the concept of leveraging one of these tools to move away from a theoretical cost center. But I do like the direction that you are going. Next, we'd like to ask for some career advice. So if someone is early or mid-career, maybe they're looking to get into maintenance, maybe they're looking to get into software, maybe they're looking to get deeper into AI. What is the best piece of career advice that you could give them?
I would say get certified, take certification courses that are free for Claude, and get get trained on how to use some basic like LLM and agentic workflows, and then go touch grass, go be near where real world work happens. And the best thing you can do is combine your experience, your lived world experience, wherever you are in life. Whether you're working as a shift worker in a first job out of school or wherever at a fast food joint, or you're in a mid career in a manufacturing plant, the experiences that you are having combined with the power of how AI tools work is going to become a superpower that is going to transform the lives of people in a whole new sort of American dream fashion that I think is really hard to overstate. Like how powerful that skill set combined with real world experience is going to be. And there's no real world experience where I'd say you won't find opportunities.
Interesting.
Absolutely. I love that. I think that is fantastic. Thank you, Nick. Next question. If people enjoyed having a conversation with you, what sort of book or content recommendation do they have to kind of continue down that same or similar thought process and patterns?
Yeah. A book I read recently that I really like, I thought I had it next to me. Oh, I did. No, I don't. Is The Origins of Efficiency by Brian Potter. It's out of the Stripe Press, which you can find on Amazon, things like that. Really well written book on kind of, and it's right in line with everything that your audience loves. That talks about how efficiency as a concept has actually, been exercised and experienced over time. Like, how did we get to a point where we discovered penicillin and it was this like weird fungus growing in a random petri dish to like mass producing it? And I think that book combined with sort of this digital transformation industry, whatever number we're on now, 405, 607, experience.
Industry
X is a really powerful sort of reminder of where we come from and how things have changed over time, and it's an excellent sort of.
Okay, absolutely. Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. For our listeners, podcast or otherwise, Vlad will go ahead and drop Origins of Efficiency in the chat. He does this every week, Nick. I'm not just putting him on the spot. I saw the look on your face and you're like, Dave, you're putting Vlad on the spot. He's very good about it. Put him on the spot. We're going to put you on the spot. Go
I was
ahead,
going to
Vlad.
say I more purchased it as well with an Amazon audiobook credit. But yes, I will also link it for the listeners.
Perfect. I'm excited to hear what you think about that, Vlad. Next question for you, Nick. We're going to put you on the spot. If you are looking to start from scratch and are looking to go build a company or go build a product or go build something else, an interesting idea or innovation either within the industrial space or beyond just the industrial space.
Yeah, I think there's a couple ways to think about it, but where do you have like a natural experience and skill set is the first piece, and building a service-based business around that is transformative. Like, I can't tell you how many folks that I talk to need help building out a SCADA system. Like, you think there's how many SIs can the world handle? A lot more. Like, there's such a shortage of folks that can go in and do this stuff as a third party, and being able to help go in, whether that means you're going to go in and help literally build that SCADA system from scratch, whether you're going to upgrade it, update it to Ignition, whether you're going to help them learn how to implement a single AI use case. I can't tell you the level of AI education in this ecosystem. If you're somebody who's naturally drawn into that and you want to become an expert and go in and offer core services around how we're going to help set up a couple of machine learning models around specific processes, there is no shortage of demand for it. And whatever lack of demand that you're immediately recognizing is only a small amount of knowledge away from becoming demand. Because as we reindustrialize the West, there's no way we win without doing things in a more automated, AI-driven approach and data-driven approach. And so if we don't, and I think more and more industrial companies are recognizing that today, but they lack the in-house skills or resources and talent, to do that. And so literally being a door-to-door sort of approach of going to the types of those businesses, I think you could build an incredible company and business off of that today, and one where you could be easily holding many clients at once, build up a team, find like-minded folks, and sort of build a process and a playbook around it. There's a ton of opportunity there.
Interesting. I'm surprised that I guess you're suggesting to pursue more of a service venture than maybe building another product for the industry, where I thought was where you'd lean.
That's right. Well, I mean, look, the reality is like there's obviously potential. Like you can look at it from like an upside perspective of like if you build the tool that people use and like while you're sleeping, and that's where you see these dramatic outcomes. But if you look at how many tradespeople these days are multimillionaires because they've got a plumbing business, because they've got an electric services business, there's so much demand for it. And you look at the odds of success. If I start a business where the moonshot outcome is a multi-billion-dollar opportunity, and that's a less than 2%, less than 1% of all venture-backed companies get to that level. Mm-hmm. Or I go to something where there's like a 40% chance that I build a multi-million-dollar business that's going to feed my family, let us vacation, let us have a great life. Let me be in control, and you don't even need necessarily outside funding. That's the I think the honest truth of where most people should think about it. And it's not a knock on it. It's just like, I want to steer people towards success, and I want to push you towards something that is going to give you and your family the best outcome possible. And I think it's an incredibly honorable path. There's nothing, I don't have any distinction between an entrepreneur is an entrepreneur. So you take that path, you succeed and you win. I think that's good for everybody.
No, I appreciate that.
Absolutely. I like that. I would agree with Vlad. It is a very different path than you chose, but I think it is a much more stable path for the vast majority of people, and especially with the AI revolution. It has never been easier to go roll up a piece of software. As to if it's stable or not is a different question, but it has never been able to roll your own piece of software. And it will be interesting to see where that goes as a product or as a solution. Nick, last question for you today is, how can our listeners help? Who should reach out? Who are you looking to connect with? Very much your open forum to go ask the listeners anything.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, don't be a passive observer in this reindustrialization moment. Regardless of your role, regardless of where you are and what station in your organization you are in, you can make an impact and you can make a difference. Leadership that I meet are looking for people who care, looking for people who want the business to be better. Good ideas are coming from everywhere. I'm seeing it more and more. Don't think that because this is not your lane, because this is not your zone, your leader, like you try to be that change agent that you want to see it in your ecosystem. And I've seen maintenance technician level 1 drive MaintainX through a global enterprise, and just as much as I've seen, and in many cases, some of those were even more effective than when the executive wanted to drive it in. So don't ever think you're too low on the totem pole to make a difference. I think those days and those attitudes are shifting a lot faster than even may feel like it is at work. And if you've got any questions on how MaintainX can help, or just what you think, what should we do about AI? What are these AI things? We spend a ton of time looking at AI applications across the industrial manufacturing ecosystem, whether they're immediately relevant to us or not. I'm always happy to be a sounding board if anybody has any questions. So send me a note on LinkedIn, message me anywhere. I'm happy to help.
Awesome, Nick. Thank you so much. And everyone, thank you guys so much for joining us today. If you've made it this far, especially on the LinkedIn or I suppose anywhere, make sure you're following Nick and MaintainX. Make sure you're following Manufacturing Hub and Vlad and myself. We will have at least 2 more episodes talking all about industrial AI as we continue down this theme. And I feel like we're getting deep, but we're still only barely scratching the surface, Vlad. Having said that, if you guys have made it this far on YouTube, thank you guys so much. Please go give us the thumbs up. Please hit the subscribe button. make sure to subscribe to the Wrench Factor, especially the Wrench Factor After Dark, which I don't think has a official, which I do not believe has an official YouTube channel yet, unless Nick's Open Claw has somehow managed to go build that up while we were talking. And if you guys are listening on podcast form, please do the follow along. Make sure you go catch us in your earbuds every